It was all under the heading "Drafts, Checks, and Letters of Credit forwarded to Beatrice Blaine." The dispersal of the rest was rather minutely itemized. The taxes and improvements on the Lake Geneva estate had come to almost $9,000. The general upkeep, including Beatrice's electric and a French car, bought that year, was over $35,000. The rest was fully taken care of, and there were invariably items which failed to balance on the right side of the ledger. In the volume for 1912 Amory was shocked to discover the decrease in the number of bond holdings and the great drop in the income. In the case of Beatrice's money this was not so pronounced, but it was obvious that his father had devoted the previous year to several unfortunate gambles in oil. Very little of the oil had been burned, but Stephen Blaine had been rather badly singed. The next year, and the next, and the next, showed similar decreases, and Beatrice had for the first time begun using her own money for keeping up the house. Yet her doctor's bill for 1913 had been over $9,000. About the exact state of things Mr. Barton was quite vague and confused. There had been recent investments, the outcome of which was, for the present, problematical, and he had an idea there were further speculations and exchanges concerning which he had not been consulted. It was not for several months that Beatrice wrote Amory the full situation. The entire residue of the Blaine and O'Hara fortunes consisted of the place at Lake Geneva and approximately $500,000, invested now in fairly conservative 6% holdings. In fact, Beatrice wrote that she was putting the money into railroad and streetcar bonds as fast as she could conveniently transfer it. "I am quite sure," she wrote to Amory, "that if there is one thing we can be positive of, it is that people will not stay in one place. This Ford person has certainly made the most of that idea. So I am instructing Mr. Barton to specialize on such things as Northern Pacific and these rapid transit companies, as they call the street cars. I shall never forgive myself for not buying Bethlehem Steel. I've heard the most fascinating stories. You must go into finance, Amory. I'm sure you would revel in it. You start as a messenger or a teller, I believe, and from that you go up almost indefinitely. I'm sure if I were a man I'd love the handling of money. It has become quite a senile passion with me. Before I get any farther I want to discuss something. A Mrs. Bispam, an over-cordial little lady whom I met at a tea the other day, told me that her son, he is at Yale, wrote her that all the boys there wore their summer underwear all during the winter, and also went about with their heads wet and in low shoes on the coldest days. Now, Amory, I don't know whether that is a fad at Princeton, too, but I don't want you to be so foolish. It not only inclines a young man to pneumonia and infantile paralysis, but to all forms of lung trouble, to which you are particularly inclined. You cannot experiment with your health. I have found that out. I will not make myself ridiculous, as some mothers no doubt do, by insisting that you wear overshoes, though I remember one Christmas you wore them around constantly, without a single buckle latched, making such a curious swishing sound, and you refused to buckle them because it was not the thing to do. The very next Christmas you would not wear even rubbers, though I begged you. You are nearly 20 years old now, dear, and I can't be with you constantly to find whether you are doing the sensible thing. This has been a very practical letter. I warned you in my last that the lack of money to do the things one wants to makes one quite prosy and domestic, but there is still plenty for everything if we are not too extravagant. Take care of yourself, my dear boy, and do try to write at least once a week, because I imagine all sorts of horrible things if I don't hear from you. Affectionately, Mother. First appearance of the term personage. Monsignor Darcy invited Amory up to the Stuart Palace on the Hudson for a week at Christmas, and they had enormous conversations around the open fire. Monsignor was growing a trifle stouter, and his personality had expanded even with that, and Amory felt both rest and security in sinking into a squat, cushioned chair and joining him in the middle-aged sanity of a cigar. "I've felt like leaving college, Monseigneur." "Why?" "All my career's gone up in smoke. You think it's petty and all that, but not at all petty. I think it's most important. I want to hear the whole thing. Everything you've been doing since I saw you last." Amory talked. He went thoroughly into the destruction of his egotistic highways, and in a half-hour the listless quality had left his voice. "What would you do if you left college?" asked Monseigneur. "Don't know. I'd like to travel, but of course this tiresome war prevents that. Anyways, Mother would hate not having me graduate. I'm just at sea. Carrie Holliday wants me to go over with him and join the Lafayette Escadrille." "You know you wouldn't like to go." "Sometimes I would. Tonight I'd go in a second." "Well, you'd have to be very much more tired of life than I think you are. I know you." "I'm afraid you do," agreed Amory reluctantly. "It just seemed an easy way out of everything. When I think of another useless, draggy year—" "Yes, I know, but to tell you the truth, I'm not worried about you. You seem to me to be progressing perfectly naturally." "No," Amory objected. "I've lost half my personality in a year." "Not a bit of it," scoffed Monseigneur. "You've lost a great amount of vanity, and that's all." "Lordy! I feel anyway as if I'd gone through another Fifth Form at St. Regis's." "No." Monseigneur shook his head. "That was a misfortune. This has been a good thing. Whatever worthwhile comes to you won't be through the channels you were searching last year." "What could be more unprofitable than my present lack of pep?" "Perhaps in itself, but you're developing. This has given you time to think, and you're casting off a lot of your old luggage about success and the Superman and all. People like us can't adopt whole theories, as you did. If we can do the next thing, and have an hour a day to think in, we can accomplish marvels, but as far as any high-headed scheme of blind dominance is concerned, we'd just make asses of ourselves." "But, Monseigneur, I can't do the next thing." "Amory, between you and me, I have only just learned to do it myself. I can do the 100 things beyond the next thing, but I stubbed my toe on that, just as you stubbed your toe on mathematics this fall." "Why do we have to do the next thing? It never seems the sort of thing I should do." "We have to do it because we're not personalities, but personages." "That's a good line. What do you mean?" "A personality is what you thought you were. What this Carey and Sloane you tell me of evidently are. Personality is a physical matter almost entirely. It lowers the people it acts on. I've seen it vanish in a long sickness. But while a personality is active, it overrides the next thing. Now a personage, on the other hand, gathers. He is never thought of apart from what he's done. He's a bar on which 1,000 things have been hung, glittering things sometimes, as ours are, but he uses these things with a cold mentality back of them." "And several of my most glittering possessions had fallen off when I needed them." Amory continued the simile eagerly. "Yes, that's it. When you feel that your garnered prestige and talents and all that are hung out, you need never bother about anybody. You can cope with them without difficulty." "But on the other hand, if I haven't my possessions, I'm helpless." "Absolutely." "That's certainly an idea." "Now you've a clean start. A start Carey or Sloane can constitutionally never have. You brushed 3 or 4 ornaments down, and in a fit of pique knocked off the rest of them. The thing now is to collect some new ones, and the farther you look ahead in the collecting the better. But remember, do the next thing." "How clear you can make things." So they talked, often about themselves, sometimes of philosophy and religion, and life as respectively a game or a mystery. The priest seemed to guess Amory's thoughts before they were clear in his own head, so closely related were their minds in form and groove.